Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. As we're here to talk about something that almost every publisher or brand is dealing with right now, and that is the explosion of audience data. Well, as today data is everywhere, you can see what performs, what doesn't perform, and how readers engage, where they drop off, etc. But having access to that actual data is not the same as actually using it effectively. So, and that's where the real challenge begins. And that's exactly what we'll explore in today's session and how to embed that audience intelligence directly into the publishing workflows to support smarter and faster publishing decisions. Without further ado, let's check out the agenda for today. So we're going to speak about the audience intelligence in the modern newsroom and how what is the role of data within editorial workflows. You'll be able to see an integration demo between smartocto and WoodWing Studio, as this is, as I forgot to mention, our joint webinar with smartocto and WoodWing. And at the very end, we have a bit of a fireside discussion together with the speakers and a small slot dedicated for questions and answers from the audience and the speakers. And the speakers today we're joined by Danny Lehue, our product manager for WoodWing Studio. She will share how editorial workflows are evolving and how integrated insights really matter. And guest speaker Eric, he's the co-founder and CEO of smartocto, and he brings deep expertise in audience analytics and data for publishers. Before we get started, I would just like to remind you that you can ask any questions that you might have throughout the session, and we will be addressing those questions at the appointed slot at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I would like to bring up our guest speaker, Eric, on stage for him to talk about audience intelligence in the modern newsroom. Eric, welcome.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. Let me tell you a bit about numbers, right? Of course, every newsroom in the world now has audience intelligence in some way or form. So metrics have been used for quite a number of years to produce more content, to optimize content, and etc. So it's been very, very normal to use metrics in a way or form. But this is the old paradigm. I just want to sort of compare it to a car, so to say. So the traditional paradigm of analytics is, okay, you do all the work, right? You in the newsroom, you in a marketing team, you in a journalistic newsroom, you write the stories, you optimize the headlines, you pick and choose, basically. And there's an analytics program that gives you all of the dashboard numbers, right? How fast you're going, how much of the distance it still is, etc. And there is that sort of split between the actions on the one hand and what you see in the dashboards on the other hand. And that's been for 20 years, this has also been the paradigm within editorial analytics, right? Dashboarding, reporting, looking at the numbers, taking some decisions as you go along. But there's also, let's say, a new paradigm coming. And this will not surprise you because AI is coming to media in a very, very strong way. I think we're one of the first industries to really be, let's say, affected in a very large way by AI. And I can see a lot of people arguing that everything should be automized, right? So you're reading your newspaper in the car does the driving, you don't have to sort of look through the window, everything has been done. The problem with this, however, and of course we are quite used to autonomous driving in a sense, right? The problem with this is that the car has no clue what you want, right? You really still have to give it a route and let's say and a prediction on where you want to go. But do you want to take the touristic route? Do you want to go fast? Do you want to go slow? You really have to tell the system what you want to achieve in your car. And maybe for cars, it's very simple because there's a lane and there's an ultimate destination. But we all know that story strategy and story tactics are way more complex and complicated than autonomous driving. And that's, of course, very much seen today in a lot of newsrooms. Let me take an example. They really use LLMs, ChatGPT, and all these kind of Claude and all these kind of LLMs to produce new headlines to a story. And you can run an article into an LLM and you'll get basically new headlines. Again, here, ChatGPT has no clue what you're optimizing against, right? Do you want more page views? Do you want more conversions? Do you want more attention time or loyalty? Do you really want to please the sponsors or something like that? All these goals are very, very different. And LLMs basically have no clue about that at all. And so, in a sense, it's still very hybrid driving. That's what we suggest. We still are doing most of the actions in the newsroom, and I think it should be, there's a fair case to be made for that. But you're also getting data that is much more actionable. And again, here, we're very used to having navigation software in your car that says where you have to go left and right. But that's a very different paradigm than just looking at the meter and trying to see what is the best route with maps and paper maps and all these kind of things. So you're in charge, but the car actively helps you out because it knows what you want. You've told them and basically say, this is the end of the line. And it says, okay, you need to go left here, need to go right there. Even if there's a traffic jam, it is rerouting you. And that should also be the paradigm for analytics in the newsroom. It should very much actively help you out there as well. So let me give you a couple of really bold statements here. I think we've talked for a long time about the gap between data and insights, right? You have numbers, you have behavioral statistics, people click on a button or they just view an article and you have a page view. And for a long time, it was really challenging, and in a way it still is, to make a real-time dashboard out of that, or to make a really, really good report out of that. Even to know which dashboards are more attuned to which business case is quite hard work, I would say. But my bold statement here is that gap between data and insights, that problem has been solved, right? We know which data is very much attuned to which business case or which content strategy is using which metrics in what time, for example. In the last 10, 15 years, there's a couple of really good tools that really solve that problem. And I don't think that's actually a real challenge anymore. Again, building real-time dashboard is not that easy. Technically, there's all kinds of hurdles there, but it's not the main problem anymore in the newsroom. The real challenge is the gap between insights and action. And if you're fair and you look at your own newsroom, you can probably notice that, right? They have a lot of numbers. You have some kind of dashboards on the wall. Maybe it's even smartocto, but they tell themselves, okay, but I understand what is happening with these stories, but what is my next action, right? What am I going to do based on all these nifty graphs and metrics, so to say? And that part, that real challenge is a cultural challenge. It's not a technical challenge at all. So basically, the conclusion is, for us at least, editorial analytics is not about numbers at all. It's about decision making. And of course, you use numbers and all kinds of different metadata and all these kind of things in order to facilitate that. But numbers are just the beginning. And if you have a lot of numbers that basically don't mean anything into action taking, you're basically doing it wrong. And those numbers are worthless. So let's take a look at what actually needs to happen in a cultural way to have a very, very strong presence of numbers in your newsroom. So first of all, and it sounds really logical, but again, I want you to think about your own newsroom, your own organization, and really think through, did I manage this, right? Did I succeed in this? There needs to be a clear, explainable bridge between the strategy, the content tactics, and the metrics. So what is the ultimate goal for your company? What tactics are aligned with that? So if A happens, do I do B or C or D? And also, which metrics are you looking at in order to solve that problem, right? So, and what we see in organizations, a lot of time, there are multiple strategies. If you ask person A, it will sort of explain strategy 1. And if you talk to person B, it will have a totally different view on the strategy. But even worse, we see that there's a big gap between strategy and content tactics, that you're sort of For example, you have a media company that's all about conversion strategies. They sell subscriptions to, let's say, newspapers or digital newspapers. And in a sense, they're always sort of looking at page views in the dashboard, which is not nothing. It's page views, or you have to have visitors in order to get conversions, but it's not the main metric that you should be looking at, right? You have a lot of flybys, for example, from Google Discover. They don't mean anything for your conversion strategy. And we see a lot of that, right? So taking a look at those numbers, again, we solve the problem, but it's more of a question of really attuning your culture in the right way. And not less important, the newsroom and the organization need to agree on, if this happens, that needs to happen, right? So the marketing department, all of the management, the editors, they really have to have a clear sense of the next course of action. If a graph goes a certain way, if a metric goes a certain way, what do we do, right? Do we make extra content or do we make less? Do we sort of get on the socials a bit more? Do we do less of that? If you ask the newsroom a couple of these scenarios, let's say A, B, or C, what is the next course of action? You'll be surprised about how chaotic the answers will be in the long run. And they shouldn't be, right? There's a clear path to that. And the most important one for this webinar is the reason for existing smartocto is data should be actionable and forward-looking, right? A lot of people use metrics in terms of reports, and they just have really clear conclusions, again, about what happened, but data should be about what is happening or what needs to happen or what will likely be happening. Because, and this is sort of a very strange example maybe, from the philosopher William James in the United States, pragmatism, and he basically said, people take umbrellas outside because it will likely rain, right? Not because it rained yesterday. So a lot of the actions, a lot of the decisions that people take are based on the future and not on the history. And of course, it sounds hard to have metrics on the future, but actually a good analytic system takes that into account. It does projections, it does lines, and sort of get a sense of what an action from your side will in the end invoke. Maybe a last example of that, just to say, let's say it's not only the metrics, it's also the visualizations there as well. Here you have our quadrant model, for example. So, and you can do this yourself at home. It's not about our tooling in itself, it's about the way of thinking. So let's say the x-axis is about reach and the y-axis is about, in this case, loyalty, for example. And you get 4 quadrants if you do it like that. And you can imagine like the top right quadrant there, all of the content is superb. And we sort of proved again and again that content really converts into any kind of subscription at all. And of course, it's your golden stuff, right? The top left content is about the niche, right? It's not really great in reach, but it's very good in engagement or loyalty, and it's your niche content. And if that's really good, there's a lot of people that really like that content, but not maybe enough people. The bottom right quadrant is all about clickbaity stuff, a lot of reach, but not a lot of engagement or loyalty. And the substandard left bottom quadrant is content that maybe you should have a look at. Maybe you shouldn't even make it. The content of smartocto, as I always say, is 35% of all media content in any media company is basically shouldn't be there. If you take your own baseline and if you take your own metric and you basically calculate which content shouldn't be there, it's always around 30-35%. Imagine if you could save that time, right? And to get through the action there as well, the top left quadrant, you should distribute that content more. It should be on your homepage, should be in your reports. When you think the topic is very much suitable for a bigger audience, the niche content deserves a bigger audience. So that's very, very clear. On the top right quadrant, everything, replicate that as much as you can, right? So what that content is doing really well, pay a lot of attention to it. The bottom right quadrant, as you need to enrich it or follow it up with more engaging content. It has a lot of clicks and a lot of attention, but you should at least have a look on how to convert those people into other articles or into more attention time, for example. And the bottom left, as I said, evaluate, take a look at if that content really needs to be there. And if a certain topic or certain segment is always on the bottom left quadrant, ask yourself the question, is this content really important for me as a brand? And if the answer is no, I would suggest taking a very hard look at the production of that. Like I said, these are all the cultural elements of this, the bridge between the strategy and the content. The newsroom and the organization need to agree on the tactics there as well. Data should be actionable and forward-looking. And then you notice here also the word of notifications. And that's actually what smartocto has been doing since its birth, like 8 years ago. It has calculated notifications based on the data. Our vision is analytics, again, should be more like navigation software in your car. It mentions where you should go left and right. And basically, that's what data in the newsroom should also do, right? It should mention when when a story needs to go to Facebook. It should mention when you need to do a follow-up. And all of these notifications, based on the business model and based on the real-time data, are in some way or form in smartocto. And you will see them, and that's sort of an interesting sort of slide into the next slides into the webinar. You will see that later on in the WoodWing Studio as well. And the last point, and this is a segue into the next speaker as well, editorial analytics should be where editors live, right? They didn't go to journalism school to just look at graphs the whole time. They need to be there where they make the content. They need to be there when they really want to make optimizations. It needs to be full frontal and in their face all the time. And it needs to be relevant in that phase. And that's also why we made an integration with WoodWing. And Dani will tell you all about what is there in the workflow. She knows everything about that.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric. All right. And I want to talk a little bit more about the editorial workflow and the role of data. I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of different brands, publishers, industries. And the one thing that I hear most often nowadays is that we have to do more with less. Oh gosh, it's a hard time to be in publishing and in this industry, right? Because the reality is that your workflow is actively changing. You have more things that you have to worry about. You have to worry about publishing. Your deadlines are likely increasing. There's so many different stakeholders that you're managing. You've got so many different updates that have to be done. You're worrying about 50 different decisions that all have to be done in the span of one day. And all of this has to be done and managed somehow. Now, if you've never heard of WoodWing Studio, I would highly recommend that you take a look at it, because WoodWing Studio can be used as a content hub where a lot of this content can live and these decisions become transparent to other people. Now, with customers of WoodWing, you'll know that inside of Studio, you have the ability to write and create your content. And this works out really well as you're creating the content. However, as Eric mentioned, all of that data that you need, all of those analytics, it sits in an external dashboard, right? And unfortunately, no one is spending their entire day sitting in a dashboard. And that's why we need to bring them together, because in reality, people are under pressure to make these decisions, but they need the better data where they're making the decision, right? So what we're talking about is that data is living outside of where the decisions are getting made. So if you're using a workflow tool like Studio, you need that data to live closer to you so that as people are creating that content, they have it at their fingertips. They don't have to do that extra step of, wait, where do I need to go log in? What was that tool that I was using? So in a publishing area, what we're talking about is as you create content, there's a few moments that truly matter for the content creators. We know that you need to plan content, whether that's inside of Studio, inside of a tool like a Monday or a Rike or wherever it may be. Someone is deciding something needs to be written. When you're making that decision, that's when those analytics really come and matter, because, oh, what what could I be looking at that is trending really well? What insights do I have that suggest that this piece of content is going to outperform other content that I've already created? You're creating the content. This is when people are writing, you're editing the content, likely in something like a content hub. You need to know that, okay, this is why I need to write a headline in a specific way because it's more SEO friendly. Or, oh, this specific topic has been trending. This is why it's so important. And then lastly, when you're publishing the content, right when it's about to go live, this is when you're taking a final big picture glance and looking, okay, this is really going to do well because I have the story, I have my tags, I have my metadata in place. Everything is lined up to match exactly what the data suggests. This is when it's its most valuable. So if I'm looking at this from the product perspective, there's a couple of different pieces here, right? Your workflows are becoming more and more integrated with all of the different tools that you use. It's becoming less work to go and reach out to that third party. Where did I leave this dashboard? You want it to be as seamless as possible for the people who have to make these decisions so that they can produce more content and better content. It's about doing more with less. The editors, who, bless them, they are at the front end of this, they're on the front lines. They need better guidance. And it's about helping those editors get the guidance that they need at those high value points. And then lastly, context is everything. So making sure that your metadata matters, your tags, your value, all of these pieces. The reason why some articles may not perform as well is because your adoption fails because the data is not in the right place at the right time. So having those analytics at the right moment, truly key. If I look at this from the data access to the decision area, we're talking about shifting a mindset, right? Because in the old model, it was, well, I just need to do this and then I go and I send it out. If I look 20 years ago, back when print was still more dominant and still the most important channel that most publishers were managing, you would send out a print newsletter, you would send out a print magazine or a booklet, and then you would have no idea which articles were people's favorites. But now that we're seeing the rise of web and the fact that digital is outperforming print in many industries, now you can start to see which articles matter. Why are those articles getting the highest traction? All of that information becomes so much more interesting to the people who are creating the content, because now you're more likely to be able to create a new story similar that it continues to attract your audience. This is revolutionary for the people who are creating the content. It's all about bringing those insights back to the editors at those high value moments. So if I hone in on my one big key takeaway for today, is that insights are really only valuable when they're delivered in context right next to your workflow. And to me, that's one of the reasons why smartocto and Studio can fit so well together, is because smartocto brings you all of those insights, and then WoodWing Studio brings you that editorial workflow, and the two can really exist beautifully hand in hand. And to show you a little bit more about that, I'm going to invite Eric back to the stage to give you a brief walkthrough.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah, like you said, right, there's something really powerful if a good CMS, a good publishing system, and a good analytics system team up, right? You get the right data at the right time on the place that you really want it. And that's, of course, the ultimate goal. And maybe it seems really weird for me as, let's say, the CEO of a data company to say, listen, not less is sometimes more, right? You really have to be attuned to what data is actually valuable for you. And it's so easy to overwhelm newsrooms with a huge pile of numbers. They need to live where you make a decision, and they need to be accurate, and they need to be the right metric. And that's, of course, what we have been doing all that time. So let's do a bit of a demo. Let's say it's at least, we'll show you what we've built together. For the people here in the webinar, a lot of you have probably have been used to using WoodWing Studio. So you recognize what the system is all about. And basically, you make stories, of course, in WoodWing Studio. You edit them, you sort of visualize them and lay out them as well. But at the top right of WoodWing Studio, there's a button called Apps, and you can basically click that and go into the smartocto app, for example. And initially, that will go into something really interesting, but also very simple. It's a dashboard, right? So you will have that dashboard onto where you want to live. It's a dashboard with page views. It's a dashboard with all kinds of other metrics. You'll see your impact throughout the day. There's engagement in that part. And with the colors, you see where all of the visitors basically came from. So you'll have a sense of what the impact in your of your story strategy basically is. If you go into different packages with smartocto and WoodWing, you have, let's say, multiple dashboards. You can make your own dashboard. There's a lot of different versions of that when it comes also to different content strategies. But sort of the default is a very interesting, very simple, very attuned dashboard. But of course, I promised it's always more than dashboards, right? Because what happens if you make a story into WoodWing Studio and you have the smartocto app? Let's say you have a story about the Olympics and you publish that story. What basically happens here is in the top, in the bottom right, you see that the WoodWing story ID basically is connected to the smartocto story ID. And it sounds a bit technical, but basically that means that smartocto is understanding what you publish via WoodWing as well, and vice versa, right? So all of the analytics that smartocto has, basically WoodWing Studio understands to which story those metrics belong. And of course, then we can do all kinds of nifty stuff outside of the dashboarding as well, right? So for example, and again, this is just a start, we made something really special. In WoodWing Studio, there's your inbox. And in the inbox, of course, you get all kinds of messages about workflow and your colleagues and all about how to produce an even better story, for example. But in those inboxes, you also have the smartocto notifications. So automatically, based on your business model, based on your real-time data, it will say something like this, right? This story or this piece has fewer views, but readers are highly engaged. Consider it promoting it more or using it as a template for similar content. And again, if you remember the quadrant model, this is content that is in the top left quadrant, right? It's niche content, but it's really good. So you'll get notified about that as well. But smartocto has over 300 very, very interesting algorithms that help you on a daily basis and even on a minute-by-minute basis, right? So what content needs to go to Facebook, which content drives conversions or has conversions, what is actually happening on social, all of these different things, attention time, scroll depth, they're all very much into the notifications of smartocto. Even user needs, if you have a newsroom that is into the user need commissioning system, which of course smartocto is the basis of, the founder of. And of course, here you see a lot of interesting notifications, and we can have them in your inbox, and even more spectacular, we can also send them to you when you're in the social team. You only get the social notifications. And when you are on the homepage team, you only get the A/B testing notifications or something like that. There's a lot of different possibilities. And here you're actually looking at navigation software in your car. But then in this case, the car is WoodWing and smartocto is the navigation software. And wouldn't that be nice, right? If you have that as well. Of course, there's the dashboards. But you can also click on one of the stories in the dashboard, and then you go into the real-time system of smartocto. You can click here to the story page. You have views, real-time views on what is the impact from a view perspective, right? Page views or something like that. But there's also a graph on let's say, engagement in social, for example. You have all the app data. You have attention time if we implement that as well. So there's all about that specific story. And everybody in your newsroom is very happy to click on that, click on the notification, click on the dashboard, and immediately know what is the basis for the advice that smartocto gives, right? We always are giving you tips and advice very actively, but we're also giving you the why of the advice, right? Why are you doing that? And in this sense, we can help you create different workflows. We can help you in the changes that media is going through. We know, of course, that, let's say, people in the newsrooms are creatures of habit, right? And it's very difficult to change the way they think sometimes about story production. And of course, let's say, newsrooms are always almost a military operation. Everything is busy and it needs to be very precise, etc., etc. But that's also why it's so important to have it very convenient in your publishing system in WoodWing Studio, and to be connected to the next action in the workflow, for example. So this is what we built initially. It's very much ready. You can sign up to it. But I'm more, let's say, discussing here the view that both WoodWing and smartocto have, right? That's numbers need to be there where you are, so to say. And together we made that possible. And I'm pretty sure in the next weeks and months or so, we'll take that to another level. And that's a real promise. So let's get maybe the other ones back, because this is more like a fireside discussion that we can now have on all of the stuff that we did, right? And we're very happy about it.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much for the presentation of Danny and Eric. I think the car analogy and the navigation system were very great to bring us closer to what you're trying to get across and the message you have for the publishers. I believe they can download the brochure that we have by this screen. You can all see it. It's a bit more information on the integration that Eric just showcased. So if we would move on to the fireside discussion, I would like to ask a question for Eric. So can you probably share with us any mistakes that publishers make when they adopt audience analytics?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one I already mentioned, right? So basically the main mistake is that you just put a dashboard on your wall or just a report in your email and you think, okay, that's case solved, right? We have data now. And that's, of course, a bit of a lazy approach to editorial analytics, and it doesn't work, to be honest, because it starts there, right? The technical challenge is just the start of it, and it's not the end result, so to say. And I also feel that editors want more context with their data, right? The number doesn't say a lot unless you know to which tactic, to which strategy that number really belongs, right? And of course, if it's a number and you cannot get any action on that, that's also a mistake, right? It's just a number for you. Maybe just one funny anecdote. I always did it with chief editors. They say, I have a lot of data, right? And I said, okay, let's do it. Let's print it out. Every data report that you have in the last month or so. So we printed it out. I did it a couple of times. So you have a huge stack of reports, right, that they sort of consume. And then I said, okay, listen, on the left part of your desk, put all the reports that you didn't read and you didn't take any action on. And on the right side of your desk, basically put a report, a piece of paper that you really sort of did something with, right? That was the course of an action. And I guarantee you, if you do that, the right side of your desk is pretty empty. So most of the data is not very useful, right? It's just fetish, it's just numbers, vanity metrics and stuff like that. And of course, there's a lot of knowledge nowadays in 2026 on how to do that better.
I want to jump onto that too, because when I was rolling out a customer, we were talking about the same thing. And so they were recently moving from print to digital. And we were talking about analytics, working with their web team and showing them like, okay, how does this work? What does this look like? And so the print editor who had seen these analytics for the very first time, she looks up and just says, I have no idea what these analytics mean. This doesn't connect to anything that I'm writing. So it's kind of like you have to translate all of this back into a language that speaks to the editors, that speaks to the writers. And I think that that's really what this integration showcases, is that we're speaking the same language as the people who have to make these decisions.
Yeah, exactly true. And if you just throw numbers at them, you expect them to be the slave of the numbers, right? And
Sure.
I'm not sure how many people in the webinar today have experience in journalism, but I'm pretty sure everybody knows journalists are not like that, right? They don't do that, and rightly so, to be honest.
That being said, what changes do teams need to make to adopt these data-informed publishing for both speakers? You can go ahead, Danny, if you want, or maybe Eric.
Ooh, there's a lot of different cultural changes that you have to go through, first of all, because it's a cultural willingness to, first of all, accept that the way that you may or may not have been working is adapting, right? We're in a very rapidly developing world between AI, between analytics, between things shifting to digital. And it's the fact that we're constantly reinventing ourselves to try and be better for our audiences, to try and be better for our own newsrooms. And so it's the age of curiosity, I think, because how could I do this better? Why did this article do as well as it did? So as long as you have that curiosity, that willingness to keep exploring, to keep trying, to keep questioning, why am I even doing the articles that I'm doing?
Yeah.
I think that it helps people succeed, because once you have that curiosity, you're going to grow, you're going to learn, and you're going to serve both your own brand and your customers better.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I also expect sort of a lot of newsrooms expect it to come naturally, right? They don't want to go through the pain of just changing workflows and the way they approach data. And of course, I'm not advocating for pain because journalism is a lot of fun. But you have to go through emotion, right? You have to take this seriously. And in the end, you have to, right? It comes to you, whatever you're going to do. And there's no escaping like really sort of improving the quality of your decision making, right? And that takes taking a hard look at your metrics, taking the way that sort of analytics is placed into your workflow, taking a look at your publishing system and say, listen, how is this system helping me respond to metrics, etc. And the main challenge here is, I think, that newsrooms tend to be so busy that they don't find the time to some exploration or even some internal feedback, right? And I think you have to make time for that. That's if there's one advice you take away from this, really make time for strategy, right? It's worthwhile. There's a lot of things changing in AI and media. And in the next 5 to 10 years, things like that will be crucial in the end.
Thank you. Any lessons learned from publishers that are adopting data-driven workflows that you could share, Eric? Anything that strikes something that is quite, all-striking? I don't know how to say it.
I think in the end, there's two things that mainly happen when you do it right. Let's also talk about what happens when you do it right. It's a lot of fun, actually. Because I talk about pain, but if it really works and it's worthwhile, you can see people saying, listen, it doesn't diminish the quality of journalism, or it doesn't diminish my sense of writing or something like that. It's actually journalism done better, right? And there's a lot of satisfaction around that as well. And also, when you do a good data strategy and when you do a good workflow strategy, the first thing that happens is that people in your newsroom start drinking coffee together where they previously didn't, right? There's a lot of, let's say, synergy. There's a lot of cooperation that metrics can force onto a newsroom in a good way. And previously, social teams didn't discuss that much the stories that went out to Facebook with let's say, the chief commissioning editor, right? But now in a world where all these channels have to be served in some way or form, and the metrics help with that. A cup of coffee is just the first result of a good data publishing system strategy, so to say.
Sure. I mean, I remember doing a rollout with one brand who their print and their digital team were talking together for the first time. And I will be honest, the print editors were concerned because the second you start saying workflow changes, to those of us like Eric and I, it's exciting, right? Yep. Because it's something new, it's something different. But to the editors, the creatives, they come in and they're scared and, oh no, they're thinking that AI is coming to take their jobs. And we had to sit down and really explain to them, it's not about taking your jobs away. It's about trying to help you and empower you to do what you already do today better. Yep. Because it's for the first time that all of these new insights are available, that this is like a gift. We want to give you this great opportunity to learn more about the people who want to learn from you, that are working with you. So it's about trying to help you more than replace you.
Yeah. Exactly. So in the end, if the data doesn't work for you, you end up working for the data, and that's not great, right? And I think there's so many possibilities there as well. Let me rephrase also a question that Dmitry Shishkin, hi Dmitry, is into the webinar. The question is for both of us, Dani, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
It concerns a specific decision-making process regarding multimodality. So how does a CMS or a publishing system and an analytics system play out in delivering multimodal content? So basically, I think what you're referring to, Dimitri, is how all these sort of formats in different channels, how does that work, right, in a publishing system and an analytics system? Basically, we've always, if I can start, Dani, basically I've always advocating for, let's say, making a rough story, a rough narrative, and then in the end, translating them into different channels, right, with channels managers and stuff like that. There's sort of a half draft story that the newsroom makes, and then the translation into channels becomes later. And of course, you can use all of these metrics and all of these channels to make follow-ups and other channels, for example, to really see if that story resonates on all of these channels in the same way, how you use user needs or tone of voice or formats on these different channels. So there's a lot of feedback loops around that as well. And I think that will also count for how you do that in a publishing system like WoodWing Studio, right?
Sure. All right, I'm going to jump on top of this now because you're speaking my language. When we talk about all of the different platforms that have to be managed, whether it's your digital platform, whether it's your web platform, your print platform, right? There's a lot of different content. And with the rise of publishers, and what we're seeing is that people needed a place to store all of this content. That's where WoodWing comes in. What WoodWing created is something called Studio, which acts as a content hub for all of the content that's actively being created. So you create your content once, you publish your content to wherever it needs to go. You could start print, you could start digital, you could start with an image, you could start with just a rough draft of an idea. All of that content being stored in one centralized place allows it to be transparent to all of the different stakeholders that need to be involved as that story continues to evolve. Now, the benefit of having that content hub, WoodWing Studio, is that, let's say, for example, I am creating a story, right? I am doing a great job, and then maybe something happens, I go on vacation, I'm out for a few weeks. I wouldn't want Eric to be waiting on me to finish that story, right? I want him to be able to continue the story in my absence. That's why having that content hub and having the analytics attached to that content hub could help him, right? Because he can then take the story, see where other trends are around that story. He can take it across the finish line. So storing all of your content in one place helps you create a structured path for your content and really help unlock your potential there.
Exactly. And one of those stories can be, and it's a terrible word in journalism, but let's use it anyway. It can be a semi-finished product, right? It can be a narrative that you translate into the other ones. And of course, you need a good publishing system to do so. And you need good data to make those decisions as well. So that would be our explanation, Dimitri, to your question.
Thank you both. We kind of transitioned from the fireside discussion.
Sorry, that was probably my mistake, Magdalena.
No worries. We have another interesting question from Danilo. How does the system calculate the lift of a suggestion? If an editor changes a headline based on a notification and clicks go up, how does the system distinguish between the quality of the tip and natural social media velocity or breaking news timing, for example? Mm-hmm. And then there is another question. Does the integration support native A/B testing or any other solution? For example, can we serve the smartocto recommended headline to 50% of the audience and a human choice headline to the other 50% to mathematically prove the value of the AI's decision?
Well, good question, actually, right? Let me begin with the last one as well. Yeah, we have our own A/B testing, split testing algorithms. They can be used, let's say, via your own website in just an overlay that you get automatically there. But those algorithms can also be connected to the WoodWing Studio and then used there as well. So whenever you have those sort of questions, please come in. I think we can really make this, that business case, if that's very important. But yes, the answer is we do all of that. And your first question is mostly about how you can sort of evaluate the power of the notification one, where all these things are happening at the same time.
Yes.
Basically, we know, because we also have all of the historical data, right? smartocto is not only a real-time data analytics system, but it's also historical analytics. We know what's happening across months and even years sometimes. We know what's normal. We know how many people click on a teaser, for example, and when that's related to a topic or an image or something like that. So we can benchmark all of these things quite rapidly and quite well. And our notifications know when it's a niche story that deserves more audience, right? We have all these listeners on engagement, on attention time. We know all of that when we can compare it to the same story on the same day, on the same place, in the same hour. So all of these benchmarking calculations are going on the back end of this. I think we have around 65,000 calculations per second and all of these different metrics and all of these different stories. So there's a lot of machinery going on the back end, but we know quite well on how to benchmark all of these different metrics. So again, here, if you want to know more and you want to get really, really nerdy, feel free to just reach out.
Thanks. And one last question from the Fireside chat that we pre-planned, of course. What is your opinion? What will happen to analytics in the age of AI?
I think that's a really hard one to answer, but I'm going to jump in first.
Yes.
Is that the only certainty is that we're uncertain, right? Because things are going to change and AI is rapidly evolving. And I think that as it rapidly evolves, it's also going to rapidly change and evolve the newsroom. It's going to change how people consume content, how we create content, because more and more people are wanting and hoping for specialized content on these niche markets. Oh, well, how can I create more specialized content on these niche markets? So as AI evolves, it will change the reader, which will also change and develop the editor. So I think it's just a cycle that's going to feed itself. But Eric, I'll pass it to you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's such a difficult question. No, of course, there's going to be a lot of different things going on at the same time. There will be more content, that's for sure, right? There will be an avalanche of content, and not everything will be great. And I'm not saying on the newsrooms, I'm saying outside of that as well. So there's a real chance for journalism to stand out, right? And that's, of course, a given. But it needs to be picture perfect. Every content needs to be spot on, because otherwise you won't survive in that sort of avalanche, that sea of content that will be there in the years to come. Secondly, and we already noticed that, it enables us to give more context to the data automatically, right? So we've built systems that automatically give you strategic advice on the data and gives you notifications that are very dynamic to a specific person. So the why of the data will become very much more pronounced, right? And LLMs, of course, enable us like that as well. And yeah, lastly, well, so many things will happen with the UX in the years of LLMs, right? There's a lot of things that's being summarized in other tools. So probably SEO will be replaced by, let's say, optimizing content for LLMs as well.
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure data will help with that in some way or form. But let's say I will also stick with the statement of Dani, who knows, right?
Yes, it's an uncertain future indeed. Well, that being said, I'd really like to wrap up the webinar because we pre-planned kind of a 45 to an hour slot. So I think it's concerning that we don't have any more questions. Those were the couple of questions from the audiences, plus the questions I had for the speakers. I think we really unraveled an interesting topic for publishers and brands, of course, any concerns to getting that data insights closer to your workflows and the decision making you're doing with the content that's to follow. Again, you had the chance to download the brochure after we end with the live webinar. You'll be also forwarded to a URL where you can download the brochure in case you missed it throughout the conversation. Again, big thanks to Danny and Eric for today and their time and sharing their expertise and knowledge in this topic. And I do hope that we will meet again soon and discuss about the updates within the integration within and the smartocto features that you're planning to add. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you both, and thank you all.
Yes, until next time, enjoy your day and see you soon. Bye-bye.